Before we start, ladies and gentlemen, I request you all to please stand and join me in honor of the national anthem.
जन गण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंधु गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल गंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्छल जलधि तरंगा तब शुभ नामे जागे तब शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तब जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे
Thank you. This evening, we will begin with an inaugural session and then later proceed to a panel discussion. So it is now my pleasure to extend a very warm welcome to our esteemed guests to begin our inaugural session. I invite them now to please join me on the dais. Shri Rajiv Kumar Agarwal, whole-time member, SEBI. Shri Naresh Tejwani, President, ANMI. Shri Siddharth Shah, Chairman, BSE Brokers Forum. Shri Ambarish Datta, MD and CEO, BSE Institute Limited. Shri Anil Bhandari, Chairman, ICAI WIRC. Shri Pankaj Jain. Shri Rishikesh Gagan Vyas, Chairman, ICSI WIRC. And our gracious host this evening, Shri Ashish Kumar Chauhan, MD and CEO, BSE Limited. A welcoming round of applause for our guests, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. At the BSE, we like to start on an auspicious note, invoking hope and gratitude. So I request our esteemed guests to kindly proceed to light the auspicious lamp. Ladies and gentlemen, the purpose of today's seminar on taxation is to update the broking fraternity and investors on the recent developments and interpretations on taxability under business income for long-term or short-term with regard to listed equity, which is subjected to STT. The panel members will discuss the tax incidence of security transactions on different classes of investors such as FIIs, MFs, corporate and individual investors. Further, the panel members will discuss possible changes in regulations to minimize tax litigations and optimize revenue to the government. But first, let us start with the inaugural session. To commence the evening's proceedings, I invite Shri Ashish Kumar Chauhan, MD and CEO of the BSC Limited, to present his welcome address. Ladies and gentlemen, Shri Ashish Kumar Chauhan.
Shri Rajiv Agarwal, Mr. Tejwani, Mr. Siddharth Shah, Mr. Pankaj Jain, friends, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure and honor to be in front of you. Basically, this idea came with our advisor, Mr. Jindal, who suggested we need to sort of also start working on details of the tax proposals, because usually we work on the broad activities on how the taxation should be applied. Especially, I have a strong view on the STT, and many of our members have strong views on STT, but there are issues relating to the investors, there are issues relating to brokers, and there are issues relating to exchanges. And we thought this will be an appropriate forum before the budget, where we gather the experts, take their views, create a paper, and then send to the minister for their consideration. So whatever the outcome of this event will be presented into a paper, prepared into a paper and sent to the Minister of Finance, and hopefully they will consider some of our perspective. And we have some of the most eminent personalities on the dais, and now in the technical session, we will have Mr. Rakesh Mohan, Commissioner of Income Tax, CCIT1, Mr. Ketan Dalal, Mr. Ramdev Agarwal, Mr. B.M. Jindal, Mr. Kanu Doshi, and Mr. Ashwin Parekh. You will not see all of them in one room ever, except in BSc. So thank you very much, all of you, for coming. And really appreciate all the students who have come, who want to learn something interesting, and all the practitioners who have come today. So really appreciate all of you coming today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It is now my privilege to invite our chief guest, Shri Rajiv Kumar Agarwal, whole-time member SEBI, to deliver his keynote address. Shri Rajiv Kumar Agarwal.
Mr. Ashish Chauhan and other dignitaries on the dais, my senior colleagues, Mr. Jindal, Mr. Rakesh Mohan, and other esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's a matter of immense pleasure to interact with an audience as enlightened as this. Today the seminar has been kept on the tax issues, which is of course very close to my heart, because I belong to that fraternity. I thank BSc and Mr. Jindal particularly to invite me on this occasion and give an opportunity to express my views. Friends, we are passing through very interesting times. We are at a stage of the economy where we are launching ourselves to be part of a developed world. Timelines cannot be given. It may be 5 years, 10 years, or 15 years, I can't say, but that is a certainty. The present Indian society is very aspirational. Our youth is very aspirational. We want to grow at a rate more than 9%. We want an infrastructure which is as good as in any other part of the world. We want to have an access to an education system which is best in the world. We want to have access to a health system which is best in the world. Therefore, our investment needs are very heavy. I think there is no reason why we should not aspire to achieve. We are a country, we are an economy which is well diversified, which is blessed with so many resources. For example, we have got a booming service sector. We have got one of the largest pool of the manpower. We have got the largest pool of the skilled manpower also. We have got a favorable demography which provides us continuous supply of labor as well as demand. We have very developed markets in all the commodities and other services. We have got a very sufficiently developed financial system which has got a good network of banks, exchanges, developmental institutions, insurance companies to provide intermediation between the savers and the users. We have got a very large crop of entrepreneurs in the country. We have got very high rate of savings as big as 30% of the GDP, which is next to only. Still, we have got certain problems like very poor infrastructure, high inflation, which is of course coming down, and perennial problem of current account deficit. That problem is also getting resolved to a very large extent because of the falling oil prices. But friends, the poor infrastructure is a real handicap at the moment. But at the same time, I feel that this is an opportunity also, which will provide tremendous investment opportunities. But as I mentioned earlier, if we really want to fulfill our aspirations, we will require a huge pool of investment. That will be possible when we are able to raise our savings rate. Number two, we are able to mobilize a larger and larger chunk of our savings to the financial markets or to the productive process. And number three, we are able to invite foreign investment. That will be possible only when we have very good network of financial intermediation and have very attractive products. If we really want to increase the efficiency of intermediation between the savers and the users of money, then the size of our capital markets has to increase maybe manifold. Because it is normally believed that the capital markets provide for much more efficient allocation of capital. Therefore, more and more money has to be channelized through the capital markets, where risk capital is available and the market enforces discipline on the users of the money. This growth of the capital market in future will depend upon 2-3 factors. Number one, the investors get attracted to the markets because of the higher returns, because of the safer returns, and because of the transparency. And also because the cost of transaction is lower and there is ease of entry in the markets. This will also require a very good network of the distributors of various products and a very good network of the intermediaries. This will be possible when we have very competitive markets so that the services are provided to the investors in the most cost-efficient manner. That will also encourage the foreign investment in the country because the foreign investors are also very cost-sensitive. If they feel that there is a difficulty in entry in the market, if the cost of transactions is higher, then they immediately have another options. Then the consequence is that our markets get exported. What I am trying to drive at is that the cost of operation, the cost of transaction in the market is very crucial. We have to remain competitive globally. And at the same time, in the domestic market also, vis-a-vis other products available in the market, which is out of the capital market, we should provide cheaper services. Only then the money will flow to the capital market. The taxation is one of the important constituent of the cost of the transaction. That is why this seminar is very important. The discussion on the tax issues are very crucial, particularly in the coming times when we want to improve the competitiveness of our market and stop the export of our markets to the other jurisdictions like Singapore or Dubai, etc. So friends, various tax issues are bothering the market. We have also received feedback from the various associations of the stakeholders. And I may mention that all these issues we have forwarded to the government for necessary action. Of course, industry also has to directly pursue with the ministry and the government. But I would only like to highlight the importance of these tax issues because this will improve the efficiency of our markets. So friends, I am sure that today's discussions will be very fruitful and it will sensitize not only the stakeholders but also the government about the importance of these issues. And then if SEBI can do anything in this matter in taking up the issues to the government, we will be always forthcoming for that. We have already forwarded all the issues which we have got so far. If any other issue arises in future, we will take the necessary action in this regard. Thank you very much. I wish all success to this seminar and thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. A round of applause for Sri Rajiv Agarwal. To commemorate this occasion, I would now like to invite Sri Ashish Kumar Chauhan, MD and CEO, BSE, to present mementos to our wonderful guests. Sri Rajiv Kumar Agarwal, whole-time member, SEBI. Sri Naresh Tejwani, President, ANMI. Sri Siddharth Shah, Chairman, BSE Brokers Forum. Shri Ambarish Datta, MD and CEO, BSE Institute Limited. Shri Pankaj Jain, Central Council Member, ICAI. Shri Rishikesh Gagan Vyas, Chairman, ICSI WIRC. Thank you. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we are ready to now commence with the panel discussion on taxation and how it affects the stockbroking industry. Thank you to our esteemed guests for initiating the inaugural session. It has indeed been a pleasure to have you all with us. Thank you. A round of applause, please, for our esteemed guests. It is now my privilege to call upon our respected moderator and panelists to join me on the dais. They are all experts on the subject of taxation, and we're very grateful to have them with us today. First, Shri Ashwin Parekh, Managing Partner, APAS, and former Senior Partner, Ernst & Young, who will be the moderator of tonight's panel. Now for our panelists, Shri Ketan Dalal, Regional Managing Partner, PwC India. Shri Siddharth Shah, Chairman, BSE Brokers Forum. Shri Rakesh Mohan, Commissioner of Income Tax 1, Mumbai. Shri B.M. Jindal, Advisor, Tax and Legal at BSE and former Chief Commissioner of Income Tax. And Shri Kanu Doshi, Dean, Wellinkar Institute of Management. In preparation for the question and answer round that will follow the panel discussion, query slips will be provided to all audience members. Should you have a question, please write it down on the slip and include which panelist it is directed to. Our esteemed moderator will then shortlist the most relevant questions from all the slips collected. Now, as we begin our formal exploration into taxation issues affecting the stockbroking industry, I would like to invite Shri Ketan Dalal, Regional Managing Partner, PwC India, to give his presentation on the subject. Ladies and gentlemen, Shri Ketan Dalal.
Thank you. And first of all, Mr. Rajiv Agarwal, Chief Guest, Ashish Chavan, the CEO of the BSE, Kanubai, Mr. Jindal, Mr. Rakesh Mohan, Mr. Siddharth Shah, Ashwin. One sec, technology always overcomes me, so while my colleague does that, it's a great pleasure to be here. Whenever one sees a presentation on the screen, one gets worried that this will go on and on, but I promise you it won't, because I think the idea is to just set a context for the panel discussion to follow. And what I've got is basically 12 to 15 slides to just highlight some of the issues. And before preparing for this presentation, I had a conversation with a couple of interfaces within the BSE, including Mr. Jindal, and I thought, let me put together the issues that are relevant to the stockbroking industry, but in doing so, I've taken two perspectives. One is obviously the clients of the stockbrokers, which is the investing community, which would include an FII, etc. as well. And one is the stockbrokers themselves. And, there are so many issues that one can't all of them. But what I've done is to highlight those issues which I think are more relevant. And at the tea break, we were discussing, we are already on the 5th of February and the budget is there on the 28th. We're just over 3 weeks from the budget. And many representations have been made. Some will still be made, but I suspect that those which have already been made are the ones which will probably be considered, because now it possibly may be too late, but one can still try. So I think we'll also put some futuristic perspective. Mr. Agarwal, you mentioned that we are at a very interesting stage of the economy. So I thought I'd make 3 broad preliminary comments to contextualize the presentation. The one is that one of the problems that we are facing, and I must say the government in the last 9 months has done a lot, and while tax is a very, very difficult subject, some changes have been made in the last few years as well. But I think one of the big issues, my first point is that there is a very serious need to align laws to reflect the current reality. And REITs, for example, is a classic example, and I know how much work SEBI is putting into it to make REITs actually see the light of day, because in my initial reaction when REIT came was, no, this should be okay, but when I went deeper and saw the fine print, I realized that there are lots of gaps, so that alignment is a problem. The second is the uncertainty of tax law is the heart of the problem. People say, I don't mind, I have clients, international clients say, instead of 10, I don't mind paying 15, but tell me it is 15. And tell me it is 15 on 100 as opposed to 15 on some uncertain number which turns out to be 500. The third point, which is an extension of the second point, is I am very firmly of the view that the problem of Indian tax law is not the law. There are problems in the law, but it is actually not the law. It is the administration of the law on the ground. This is the heart of the problem. You can go on and out, and of course, this is not a technical session in that sense, but if I give you one example, you would have been seeing Shell and Vodafone and transfer pricing and all that. The law on that looks exactly like the European law, the OECD law. On the ground, what happens is completely different. So with these 3 preliminary observations, let me, without further ado, launch into the presentation. Now, where's the down button? Dignesh, this one? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so this is just the broad contents. I already took you through this. Really nothing much in this slide, but just one point. If you see, the definition of securities and all is very broad. And again, this is not a sort of over, and I'm aware that there are some students here, but I have to bear in mind the context of this seminar. This is just to set the context. And really, if you see from an income tax standpoint, and Ashish Chauhan mentioned about this STT, so I won't go deep into that, because that's not the purpose. But if you see the point stating income tax, I just want you to focus on the fact that in the context of shares, and we primarily talk of shares, and a lot of things can apply to debentures, etc. There are 2 sets of income that we are talking about. One is the recurring income, which is primarily dividend in the context of shares, or interest if it is, say, debentures. And then second is what I call exit income. So when you sell, and there, of course, one of the big problems is it business income or capital gains? And that's a big issue worrying both the stockbroking community as well as their clients. And we'll talk about that a little bit. So if you just look at the big picture, if you step back and look at the big picture, it's what is there on the screen in front of you. You could either have business income or you could have capital gain. And within business income, you could have what I call normal income and what I call speculation income. And there is a significance of that because there are certain issues on set-off of speculation losses, etc., against normal business income. And therefore, it becomes important to classify an income as one or the other. And in capital gain, of course, as you're aware, you have long-term and short-term. There are various other ways you can slice it, gains versus loss, resident versus non-resident income, and so on and so forth. But very broadly, the big picture is what you see on the screen. Let's deal with something which is occupying, and I know that this is occupying the attention of the Bombay Stock Exchange, and Mr. Jindal pointed out to me that a lot of work has gone into it, and which is the controversy of business income and capital gain. I'm glad to see Dina being here. We've discussed it quite extensively. You know, the issue is the following, that if something is capital gain, the taxability is lower than if it is business income. And if that characterization is, let us say, a loss, and then the further controversy of speculation versus non-speculation, and Dinaben, you made some significant efforts to bring in an amendment which has partly worked, but partly needs some tweaking, and I'll refer to that. Then the characterization becomes extremely important because the implications of that characterization are different. So without going into too much technical detail, if I were to give you the broad message, you know, there are several judicial precedents. In everything in tax, there are many judicial precedents, and sometimes I feel that many of these cases and controversies do no more than keep people like me in business. I'd rather prefer to do something constructive, but if the litigation is there, we have to deal with it. And the judicial precedents broadly have laid down several principles. And then in 2007, a circular of the CBDT came up, which laid down a lot of parameters to say, is it business income or is it capital gain? And you see most of them on the screen. That in the books of accounts, for example, is it treated as a stock in trade or capital asset? The second bullet, I'll park for a minute, and I have a lot to say on the second bullet. Just park it. Volume and frequency of transaction, ratio of purchase sale, holding period, treatments in books of accounts, and so on and so forth. And I think they are all sensible tests. The problem is they are obviously all subjective tests, and it's fine to have subjective tests, provided the subjectivity judgment is exercised sensibly. The problem is sometimes it is, very often it is not. But I do want to make one point on the second bullet. And this is a classic example, absolutely classic example of something which is completely out of tune with reality. And that is the intention of the investor at the time of purchase, profit or dividend, pray, in the last 20 years, who on earth, and you will always have an XYZ dividend yield fund and something or the other, and there will be the stray cases. Who on earth normally, in 98% cases, invest in shares for the purpose of dividend? Absurd. Now, if I am not investing in shares for the purpose of making profit, then pray, why am I investing at all? Now, if you use that as a criteria to say that if you invest for profit, your business, and if you invest for dividend, your capital gain, you killed the matter before it begins. The absurdity of this is the classic, and I would urge Mr. Agarwal to make this point to the CBDT. The absurdity of this is in an era which era has gone 10 years ago, 15 years ago, maybe even 20 years ago. But still it came in 2007. Nobody invests in shares for the purpose of dividend. The fact that I'm investing for profit doesn't mean it is business. If I'm doing 50 trades in a day, I can understand. If I'm a day trader, I can understand. If I do 2 investments in a year, or 5 investments in a year, or 7 investments in a year, that's all, for example, and this is just an example, it is highly unlikely that I'm a trader if I'm making, let's say, 1 trade in 27 days, for example. But this is there. Now, this is the kind of thing which is leading to the controversy. Now, I don't want to take you into a whole host of case laws, but, you know, there's a Mumbai tribunal decision in Platinum Asset Management, etc., which says, after considering all this, that even for an FII, it is capital gain. Now, one might take a stand that an FII would normally be trading, but still they have held it to be capital gain, and in fact, the legislature has amended the law, the government has amended the law to actually expressly clarify it for the purpose of FII. But that clarification is not there for the purpose of a normal investor. For that matter, it's not there even for private equity. You know, in fact, surprisingly, in a what I would call positively aggressive decision, there is also a tribunal decision to say that for an FII, even in derivatives, it is capital gains. Now, that may have gone a little far, but it's there. But for a normal investor, the aam janta, so to speak, and people like you and me, there is no such clarity. What is the result on the ground? Endless chaos. So the subjective tests are actually not bad tests. They are quite sensible, except for the second bullet. But the implementation on the ground is a problem. And therefore, what is the thought? Mr. Jindal was mentioning that there could be something to tell the government, look, can you make it into something like a time-based test, that if it is 3 months, then it is business. If it is more than that, it's capital gain. Now, I don't want to go into whether that is good or bad, but that is one possible view. And while doing so, one has to realize that if you do it for a normal investor, what does it do to an FII and so on and so forth. So I don't want to get into that. But either there has to be some objective test, or two things have to happen. The second bullet has to go, and there must be some further examples given to say that this is the way it will be interpreted. While the subjectivity will not disappear, the subjectivity will become lesser. So let's move on. Let's talk of recurring income. The recurring income dividend, of course, is no longer taxable in the hands of the investor. But I just want to pause for a minute, and because it has got some relevance to deductibility, I'm very clear in my mind that dividend is being taxed. The tax is being paid by the company, and if the shareholder is the owner of his proportionate share in the company, is effectively commercially bearing that tax. But it does not seem like he's paying the tax because they keep on saying, "हमको तो tax free मिला, तुमको tax free नहीं मिला, company ने 20% भर दिया, पर तुमको पता नहीं लगा." So it is not really tax free, although technically, theoretically, it looks tax free. Okay, and as I said, there is an implication because income expenses cannot be deducted against quote unquote tax free income, which technically this is deemed to be. Okay. And the second is, as I said, even that interest or dividend, if at all it were to be taxable, it won't be in most cases, at least technically, then it would be held as business income, otherwise income from other sources. And again, this is more relevant to the interest part than the dividend part, and therefore more relevant to the debenture part rather than the share part. Let's come to the exit income. As I said, if it is business held as stock in trade or business assets or its trading portfolio, then it is business income, and we saw in the previous slide the challenges of categorizing that in the first place. But assuming that the tax department agrees that it is held as investment, then of course the exit income will be taxable as capital gain, either short term or long term. If held for trading purposes, as I said, it will be taxable as profits and gains of business. And I will just come to some of the challenges on that in a slide or two. I mentioned about FII, which is by the way now called FPI, Foreign Portfolio Investors. And the securities held by FPI are now considered as capital asset. And therefore, the controversy of whether it was capital gain or business income has gone away so far as they are concerned. I just want to step back and maybe jump the gun a little bit. There's something coming in the next slide. So far as business income versus capital gain on a cross-border basis is concerned, like an FII, there is this concept which you must have heard called permanent establishment. So suppose you have a presence on the ground, is it a PE or not, etc. And the implication of a PE is only if it is business income in the first place. The concept of PE has no, PE as in not private equity, but PE as in permanent establishment. The concept of permanent establishment has no relevance if it is capital gain, and that is what they have clarified. I think this was the whole idea was to incentivize fund managers to be located in India. Before I move on to the next slide, there are only 4 or 5 now slides. Just the punchline at the bottom, it's actually not linked to the remaining part, MAT. You know, there has been some notices issued by the tax department on MAT on FIIs. And I think it was completely unwarranted. And I think to be fair to the tax officers, they are actually also saying that we also don't think it is leviable. But the audit department of the government is taking the objection, so what do you expect us to do? So you can't really blame them. And I think it is very important for the CBDT to clarify this, because I think everybody knows that MAT was never intended to apply to an FII kind of situation. It first applies where you have an Indian balance sheet, so to speak. But it's there, and one is hoping that the budget will clarify. You know, and one can always see some words and say, but isme to aisa bhi interpret kar sakta hai, etc. And I always say that words are an imperfect expression of human thought. And that thought, the thoughts are not, you know, if they are not clearly articulated, then one has to read it commonsensically, because there is a substitute for everything in the world, but there is no substitute for common sense. So unfortunately, this controversy needlessly has arisen at a point of time when we are at the cusp of far bigger things, far better things, far more important things, and when we should be devoting our time and energies to something sensible as opposed to some absurd thing like this. But anyway, it's there. And again, I would urge SEBI to look at that, because I think everybody knows this was never intended. But once this controversy has arisen, it has a life of its own. You will soon see those 50 notices getting converted into 50 demands. And before you know, the market will collapse by 2,000 points for the wrong reasons and not for the right reasons. Non-residents capital gains tax, the indirect tax transfer, the Vodafone controversy, etc. Again, this can have relevance from a stock exchange, when, let's say, an open offer is made for a company outside India, etc. It's pretty technical, so I'm not going into it. Again, from a day-to-day perspective, this has limited relevance. The only point I want to make is that they've amended the law, which is fine. I just wish that they had not done it retrospectively, so let's see what happens in the budget. From the perspective of non-residents, whether private equity, whether FIIs, and obviously dealing through the stock exchange or otherwise, there are exemptions, and this may be relevant to an investor who has a short-term capital gain, who would otherwise be paying tax, but if he invests through Mauritius, Cyprus, or Singapore, he would not be liable to tax in India because of a treaty exemption. And I just want to make one point here, and again, SEBI and Bombay Stock Exchange should consider. Take the case of Mauritius. Everybody knows that the Mauritius company in between normally does not have substance. That's the reality of life. It does not have substance. I mean, I've been to Mauritius 4 or 5 times at the time when they started, and they're all in Port Louis, etc. And they are relatively shell companies. Again, there are 2 types in that. One is a pooling vehicle in Mauritius, such as a fund, and second is a pass-through. Neither of them as a substance, except the pooling vehicle in that sense has greater credibility, because at least there is a reason to be located somewhere, and if that somewhere is Mauritius, so be it, because it has a benefit. The point I want to make is this, for the benefit of the representation that need to be made, because it impacts the stock exchange. The Mauritius exemption was based on getting a tax residency certificate. One might say it is tax avoidance, but at that time India needed money. Today, you can't go on having double speak. You can say, I believe that this blessed tax avoidance, if I were to call it that, should be done away with, and in phases we will remove it. That's one way to look at it. And then whatever happens to the market, happens to the market. The other is to say, it's there and we will live with it. And even when general anti-avoidance rules comes, one will have to specifically address the issue of Mauritius rather than hoping that it dies away somewhere or goes under the carpet, because it won't. The reality of life is it won't. It will surface. The problem is that today, this is another issue of uncertainty. Is there or not there? So it's like saying there is an exemption, but there's no exemption. So nobody knows what's happening. But in technical position is that there is an exemption. So again, I won't go into technical details of some of this. Very quickly, last 2-3 slides, as I said, income characterization, there are under the portfolio. Now this is under the portfolio management scheme. So even when you call portfolio management, it sounds like trading. So my portfolio manager is DSP Merrill Lynch, for example. But I hardly do 15, 17, 18 trades in a whole year. So in my mind, that is not a trade at all. It's investments. But sometimes tax officers pick the word portfolio management and say, oh, this is portfolio management, so it's trading. It's not, really. So there are decisions, majority of them are in favor. I've put some of them down. And similarly, there are decisions to say that against the portfolio management fee should be deducted. So if you have got capital gains, the portfolio management fee should be deducted. Now one can go on arguing on wordings, but if you see the logic of it, I'm paying the fees because I want to make a profit, and I made a profit, then you give me the deduction. It's as simple as that. So I think the alignment of the commercial reality with what is happening on the ground needs to be done. Coming to the brokers themselves, and many of these will apply to their clients also, and some of it we've discussed already. So I think the issue is that this is on the speculation part. The distinction of speculation versus non-speculation is delivery versus non-delivery. So if you're on the left-hand side, you have the shares and commodities basket. On the right-hand side, you have the derivatives basket, which would necessarily be non-delivery based if you sell the futures or options. So the non-delivery is considered to be speculative, and the delivery based, the cross means it is not speculative. And in the deemed speculative, if you see the second box below, deemed speculative, there's a question mark, and Dinaben, that is the controversy I'm talking about, and I'll come to it in the next slide. Sorry, I forgot to mention, if it is a speculative, the relevance is this. If it's a speculation loss, then under the provisions of section 73, you can't set off the loss against the income, and therefore, logically, if you have a case to say it is not speculation, you would prefer it that way, because then you can set off. That is the implication of what I'm saying. Okay. So, for some strange reason, there was a provision in law that where any part of the business of a company okay, is just for a company, is XYZ dealing in shares, then the company shall be deemed to be carrying on a speculation business, even though it is actually not so. So, I don't know what was the logic, but perhaps the feeling was that companies, even though they may be small companies, somewhere in some mind of the government must have that the company doing that business, let's discourage it by calling it speculation. That may have been. But now they have put a word, other than a company, the principal business of which is the business of trading in shares. Now, as I said, Dina Ben had made a lot of effort to get this amendment done. So it's like saying if the principal business is that, then you exclude it, but if it is, so to speak, non-principal, then you consider it as speculative. Now, the word principal has created a controversy. So let's say the case of a stockbroking company. The stockbroking company's principal business is broking. So now that loss will again be considered to be this. So again, this word principal business has created a controversy, and that I'm sure some representations have been made on that. A few quick points, for the brokers. Do you get a deduction on loss of error trades? Do you get a deduction on bad debts? Now, so far as error trades are concerned, there are decisions to say, yes, you must. And I think that's logical, because if you make an error, that's an incidental part of your business. Just as you make a loss in business, it's an incidental part. So you should get it, because sometimes you make a profit also by error, right? And you tax that, okay? You just hold on to some products and suddenly it goes up. So it's not an error as in a mistake, but it's an error as in luck, and you're taxing it. So I don't see any problem with this. The bad debts on non-payment by clients is a technical issue. That bad debts is allowed when you have taken it as income, but the income is only the broking. So the debt from the client has never gone as part of the income. But there are provisions in law to say that an embezzlement loss, for example, is allowed on commercial rational basis, and therefore this should also be allowed. So there is a controversy. Some say it's allowed, some cases say it's allowable, some it's not allowable. This is another area where the government should clarify. The last bullet is important. This is the interest. There are interest and other expenses, but let me take interest. Let's say you take a loan to invest in shares. You are not today getting a deduction because of a provision in section 14A, which says that interest or expenses on exempt incomes is not allowed. And I made a mention that dividend is technically exempt income, although in commercial terms it is not exempt. So you are not getting a deduction of that, and we have already made a representation from various bodies, including one where I am the chairman of the Direct Tax Committee, to say it is actually taxable. But I am not physically paying that tax, the company is paying on my behalf, so you should give it as a deduction. I don't know whether these representations have been made by BSE. So that brings me to my last slide. Some few key takeaways from the presentation that I made in the last 20 minutes. Clearly, one is the need for more certainty on characterization of income, which there are various, but business income versus capital gain, and indeed within business income, speculation versus non-speculation. I also mentioned about the need for clarity on deductibility of portfolio management fees. The third one, which is subsumed as such in the first one, is that the deemed speculation should not apply to stockbrokers. And in fact, there should be clarity on what they even mean by principal place of business. And there are other matters like MAT should not apply to FPIs, etc. So with that, let me close here. Thank you very much, and I hope you found it useful. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It is my pleasure now to call upon Shri Ashwin Parekh, Managing Partner, APAS, and former Senior Partner, Ernst & Young, to moderate a panel discussion on the subject of taxation with regard to stockbroking and related matters. Over to Shri Ashwin Parekh.
So I suppose we've started the seminar quite well with an excellent inaugural session which set out the perspective. And thereafter, Mr. Ketan Dalal has really provided a very wide-ranging perspective on various aspects which can come up for panel discussion. I'll just make two observations. We have an extremely learned panel over here, and I suppose, we should give more time to the panel members. One observation, of course, was just to structure out the seminar from now on. We've got about an hour and a half, and we've got two things now to achieve, three things actually. First is we've got a panel, contribution, so each panel member will really put out their perspective on various aspects, which were covered, and additional aspects as well. Thereafter, so I'll request each panel member to take about 5 to 7 minutes, just to do that. The next half an hour, perhaps we will devote in discussing with the panel members themselves. There can be an inter-se discussion with the panel members. So if there is anything, any new dimension that the panel members want to add to any matter that was discussed by Mr. Dalal, then it could be taken up by Ketan, then it could be taken up. And then we have participants who have various questions, and they'll put out their questions, and if we've already covered them earlier, then I'll just read out the question and I'll say it's been covered. Otherwise, we'll take the whole thing up. So that's the structure of the panel discussion now. Just to give it a perspective and make the most out of the seminar. I'll just give one background note, and then I'll immediately move on to the first panel member. Mr. Shah will then talk about it. The observation is a very simple one. And I mean, if I just take from the inaugural session and what Mr. Agarwal said, and then from what Ketan was trying to point out, 2 or 3 perspectives. One is, we have to recognize that if domestic savings have to grow, and if the domestic savings have to be channelized in capital markets, in securities, then in that case, the complexities which arise in the taxation arising out of security investments must also be addressed as more critical or more important. I mean, over my last several years of practice, I've realized that an investor gradually migrates from one level of complexity, in investments to the next. He'll start off with perhaps deposits, bank deposits, which are the least, difficult to interpret or understand. From there on, he migrates perhaps to capital markets, he invests in funds or in securities, and then he migrates to insurance and pension at a certain age. The trouble with the second layer is that the second part expects the investor to know so much about taxation, expects him to really understand, otherwise the gains that he may make out of his investments may not really come to him. And that's the perspective with which Ketan provided a very good understanding of what are those complexities basically. Second observation is last roadshows, FII roadshows, in last 8 years, I would have met about 30 to 30% of, that is in terms of their investments, people who made investments in India. And only one thing they say compared to many countries in which they invest, Indian taxation is the most difficult to understand. Law is very simple, as Ketan said, but interpretation can be manifold, and that's where the complexities lie. With that, Mr. Shah, you can just provide your perspective on the subject basically.
Good evening, friends. Sir, you mentioned about, migrating, how investor comes to the capital market. It starts with the investment in, first is just FD and then comes to the market. There are a number of instances which I can point out where the existing investor, retail investor, is running away from the market. And they were here for almost a decade, and there were instances because of uncertainty of the taxation. When he trades, he doesn't know how he is going to be taxed down the line. Ketan Bhai has very well explained to us. So, and apart from that, the discrimination, discretion which is given to the assessing officer to decide on whether it's a long-term, short-term, or the business income. That is something wherein the investor says, I don't want to invest, I better invest in something else. Apart from that, the information called for during his assessment, specifically what we call AIR, wherein even he does an investment of even 2 lakh of rupees in the capital market, he's picked up for scrutiny, and whole sort of information is asked for. Number of transactions he has to go and explain. And what we understand when we go to income tax officer and explain to him that, okay, this is a transaction done, he only verifies the bill issued by the broker. No more value addition he is doing and says, okay, now it's clear. But he has to go through the entire harassment and the process he has to go through. So these are the few instances by which existing investor who were with us, they said that I will not like to invest in the capital market. So second part is about a dividend, as he explained that though in commercial term dividend is not tax-free, but assuming it's a tax-free in the hands of investors, subsequently on assessment, that 0.5%, I may not be exactly knowing the section because I'm not conversant with those sections, but 0.5% of the dividend is of the assets, investment assets, which will probably would have given dividend. So sometimes there are instances that dividend is 5 lakh and disallowance is 10 lakhs because the whole entire assets doesn't pay a dividend. So this is the second point which is also bothering. And on now this stage has come, what I feel is that entire transaction is digitalized. Stock exchange has all the data. So why this, again coming to the first point of deciding on whether it's a business income or it's a long-term capital gain or short-term capital gain. Because when I invest, with some target. So that target is maybe achieved in the same day, 10%. So I sell it off. But in his slide, he's explained, it's a speculation trade, it's intraday trade. But intraday trade happened because I wanted to invest for a long term. But I got my target, I sold it off in the market. So that's to be treated as an investment activity. One suggestion, which I just want to throw open on the floor for discussion, saying that there is a short term and there is a long term. Why can't we have something called a short term, a medium term, and a long term? A short term, wherein we are saying it's say for example, less than 1 month. Medium term is say 1 month to 12 months. And long term is obviously about 12 months. What I'm trying to do is that investment in a cash market, where the intention is to remain invested. But because either my target on positive side or on negative side, it has reached and I have to square off the transaction. So treat these as investment only. Don't treat this as either speculation or count as a business income. Different tax slab can always be applied. Let's say 10%, 20%, 30% kind of a thing. That's again a matter of detailed discussion. But we are saying, at least for the transactions, because it is digitalized, very easy to understand. And last one point which I wanted to make is about the audit, provision for audit. Because audit is, it's based on your turnover. And in capital market, turnover is manifold, right? So 1 crore is too less. And if at all there is a section 44AD, if I don't know this correct. So if it's less than 1 crore, but then 8% profit you have to presumptive tax you have to pay. In our market, 8% on a turnover is never the case, kind of a thing. So these are the couple of points. And what I want to highlight is if streamlined, I think retail participation definitely will come back. And the backbone of the capital market is retail investors. So that's what I'll conclude.
No, I think these are two interesting, very interesting, in addition to some of the difficulties that you pointed out. The whole definition of period or term, whether a medium term could be considered for the purpose of taxation. And the second important part, that you talked about was the threshold for audit, basically. And that's something that is it's a good takeaway. Just to make the most of the seminar, friends, what I thought we could do is, I'll request all the panel members to put out their views once again on the site. Mr. Jindal will create some environment where you can put out those. If you have to go by what Mr. Chauhan said earlier, if there is going to be a paper from this forum, which has to go to the government and which has to go to the Ministry of Finance, then I suppose the panel members can really start the contribution. Ketan's material is the base point, but we take that as well, and then you can add on, each member can then add on some of the points. Because otherwise seminars end up in discussions, we interpret and we try and attempt looking at our own problems. Solutions have to be heard by the ministry or by the government. And unless you give the government an opportunity of saying what exactly should be there, it doesn't work, basically. So that's the observation that I would like to make quickly. May I now turn to Mr. Rakesh Mohan and request him to render his, please. 5 to 7 minutes, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, eminent personalities sitting on the dais and friends, 5 to 7 minutes is too short a time for any communication of my thoughts on the subject. I would like to talk at 3 different planes. First would be a small response to what other speakers have said. The second part will be some of my thoughts where perhaps we should have deliberated, I would like to put across. And in the end, some warning signals to the share brokers sitting here, as I'm looking at the income tax department taking a stand and going ahead. Some of the critical issues where we are likely to face problems with the department, which will be very interesting. Coming to the issues that have been raised already, the short-term capital gain, long-term capital gain, and business. If the motive to begin with is to earn profits, where's the difficulty? It's business profit. Why bother about whether it is short-term capital gain, long-term capital gain, or business? I mean, with due respect to your thoughts, if the motive really is business, because the entire issue of capital gains, short-term, long-term, business profit, the basis of decision-making is the intention of the person. That is the starting point. If you can establish the intention, none of the other criteria is really required to be satisfied. So perhaps, if you go into that issue, it becomes a non-issue. Going ahead, my practical experience says that most of the difficulties are coming up because we are not able to establish our intention. Our documentation is weak. And there, don't mind, but it is the CA community who has to be blamed. They are not guiding the investor, the share broker, of how to maintain the documents to establish the intention. In corporate entities, we have a clear-cut division. Stock in trade, investment. Why not for others? Once that division is there, things will be far easier than what we have today. That's just a small thought from me. MAT provision, applicability of MAT provision. See, the definition of company, it is applicable to a company. And Section 2 in the Companies Act defines what is a company. It includes a foreign company. I don't see any doubt on that front, that MAT will always be applicable to foreign companies, irrespective of whether exempt income exists or whatever. In the slide, there is the issue of TDS. I think you did not elaborate upon it, but then be cautious. Mumbai ITAT recently has come up with an order saying that forget double taxation agreements. TDS has to be deducted, because whether an income is taxable or not is the prerogative of the assessing officer. So unless the assessing officer decides, yes, this income is not taxable, you have got to deduct TDS. This is one major issue where a reference must go to the government to take some step. Otherwise, every payment that is made to the fund will be subjected to TDS. I hope I'm making that point clear.
Yes.